Welcome to Be Well, an It's Okay podcast designed to promote and support mental, financial, physical, and social well-being. Be Well provides insights, tips, and strategies for enhancing all aspects of well-being through conversations with experts. Whether you want to manage stress, improve your financial health, boost your physical well-being, or enrich your social relationships, this podcast is a go-to resource.
Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. This is our Cummins It's Okay podcast. And today we're going to be talking about taking charge of men's health, small steps, big impact. And so thank you for joining us today. And we have a special guest, Kenton Boston, who is the CEO and president of Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Kenton, thank you so much for joining us today. We're going to talk about why this matters, which is that 70% of men's health issues are preventable, and there are small steps we can be taking to make a difference. Kenton, let me hand it over to you to introduce yourself a little bit more and kick us off with why men's health is so important to you and about your work.
Yeah, thank you very much. Pleasure to be with you, and really look forward to the discussion and helping people understand their role in their own health journey. I say that as someone, in my mind, I'm still 21, like any good person. As we tick along, you're still a certain age. But of course, I know that I'm not, and I've had a number of experiences that really have forced me to reimagine who I am, and that's kind of why I'm in this position today with the Canadian Men's Health Foundation. Our research, as you said, suggests that 70% of the diseases that we get as we tick along in age are avoidable. It's the small steps in life that make an enormous difference in your life. We have a campaign on our website called Health Check, and that's a campaign that helps people come in to understand your risk of the 8 chronic diseases that men get. And it's really based on kind of your personal record. It's anonymous. You come in, answer the questions, and you get a path forward. So it's easy to get overwhelmed, but it's also easy to say, what can I do today? Take small steps.
Excellent. Thank you, Kenton. And yeah, looking forward to getting into that discussion with you on what some of those small steps can be. Interested to know, a lot of these things are things that oftentimes we know we need to do them, but we have all these obligations, all these responsibilities, and sometimes it's hard to find the motivation to make change. So I'm wondering if we can explore that a little bit, and wondering if you can share your story about what has led to changes for you, and has also led to you to be in this role, right, as leading the charge for the Canadian Men's Health Foundation.
We grow up with certain stigmas, certain understandings of who we are. I lived into that with my age bracket of growing up to being someone strong, self-sufficient, to trying to affect change. I worked in the world of media, which is a really upside down world in so many fronts these days. And I traveled extensively. I lived in one part of the country, traveled and worked in another part of the country, was constantly on an airplane, high stress. And I did that for a number of years. I would travel across North America, Europe, dealing with breaking news often, and setting our teams up for success in covering some of the big stories of the world over the last 20 years. And that was just a 7-day-a-week job that you kind of lived into and grew into. And one thing I kept putting off was my own journey, my health journey, and I needed a physical. And I was too busy to get a physical, and I kept putting it off. And as I did that, I had problems raising my left arm. I couldn't raise my left arm. I was lifting weights and convinced myself that a rib must have popped out, and I just, hit weights that were too heavy. Back off, get in an airplane, and rinse and repeat. And I did that for months. And my arm kept getting more sore, and I finally acquiesced, went to get my physical. Long story short, the conversation the next day informed me that I had a massive growth around my left kidney. The problem for me was this happened just as COVID struck, just as the world closed down. Couldn't book me for any more tests because of COVID. The hospitals had shut down. So I had a really terrible, wrenching moment of understanding that something inside of me. It probably wasn't cancer. Maybe it was, maybe it wasn't. But I couldn't even get to see a doctor to determine what it was and what were next steps. I finally got that sorted, and I went in and talked to a urologist, and they said not to worry, it's not cancer. We don't see cancer there. And so I kept going, and the chiropractor finally said, Kenton, this isn't right. You still can't raise your left arm. Go and you ask them to remove this mass. And I did that some months later. Long story short, it turned out to be cancer, a rare form of sarcoma, a rare form of cancer that they hadn't seen in this part of the body before. And I had another surgery, had two surgeries. The first surgery, it removed the lump from me. Took my holiday, spent, it was supposed to be a day or two in hospital to remove this mass. It turned out to be 4 and 5 days. And I remember at one point looking and wondering why I went from arthroscopic surgery to having incisions inside of me. And I asked my surgeon, what happened? This was supposed to be in and out. I'm supposed to be on a motorcycle by now. And she said, Kenton, you're still bleeding, and we think there's more inside of you. I went from I'm good and healthy all the way through to I've done something growing inside of me. And that was the beginning of the change of my life.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. And you can say that, prior to becoming a physician, I was a health coach or wellness coach, and worked with a lot of people on making life changes and behavior changes. And oftentimes it takes a big event, right, to kick off changes. And then for others, it takes really kind of getting down to what your values are, what you really want for the future, right, and kind of solidifying that. And so for you, this was a big moment. What changed?
I thought I was healthy. I thought I was doing the right things. I came out of the second surgery not able to move my left leg. I had to drag my leg because of the muscle loss. So for me, it's really about understanding it's one foot in front of the other every single day. I now have one kidney. I've got a whole other series of issues related to the one kidney. So in a way, it's terrible because I've had to reimagine my life. At the same time, I'm grateful in a sense because I am able to focus and tell others about the journey that you need to look after in your own space. And that is one step in front of the other. And life is so challenged right now on so many fronts. And it's about keeping the small things in your life and focus on you, yourself, and the small things. I feel society right now with Facebook and all the other things that are out there, it's about me being strong, certainly for men, this idea that men need to be strong and stand on their own. And that's kind of the perception that we all live into. And every single day, I still try that. What I now say to people, which is use your network, have conversations. I didn't do that. And I was gone for about a year and a half from work, just kind of recovering. And I went back in. And there was a man that came into my office. He was a sports person. I worked in the world of TV. And so to stereotype sports people, broadcasters, big guy, big loud guy. And he came into my office. And kind of breaks me up a little bit. He came into my office and he walked over to me in the middle of a meeting and he just put his arm around me and he had tears coming down his face. And he just put his arm around me, gave me a hug, and he walked back out and didn't say a word.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Thank you for that. Yeah, that sounds like independence and isolation, right? And reality is that we're all getting older, right? It is that birth is a terminal illness, right? It is that we're all getting older. If we don't take action on our health, it does diminish over time. And there are other aspects of our lives where we work on, say, like a financial reserve, right, for retirement or for when we're older, and we don't necessarily focus on a health reserve, right, on kind of gearing up what are those small investments we can make today for the future. So I'm wondering if you can expand on that a bit um, for your foundation, what your priorities are, and what really how are you trying to engage with men to help activate them to be focused on their health?
This year, we spent a lot of time focusing on the sense of growing your network, making
Mm.
sure that you have your support network, because there is a lot of demand and need for that support from men to make sure that they have the support system from family or other medical entities as they go about their new life. They have a new life, they're thankful for it, but it's a different life. And so, where's the support and the psychological and the mental side of that? And that's what we're here for, to make sure that men understand as you go through these challenges, you're not alone. And our job as CMHF is to make sure that we connect you to the resources that you need, be it physical or mental. And that's our mission in life.
Yeah. Excellent. Thank you, Kenton. And yeah, taking some notes over here. So I'm hearing you loud and clear on building your social network, and that rings very true to me also as with having been a health coach. One of my first tips that I would give people is the buddy system, right? And it would
Yes.
be find your buddies, find those people who have similar goals to you, have similar interests as far as, that other guy who also wants to be there to play with his grandkids and be active with his grandkids. Find those like-minded people to be in your corner, that you can lean on.
100%. I mean, at the end of the day, men are who they are, but that doesn't mean that you can't be vulnerable, that you can't hug and cry and share your feelings. So I wanted to share that. And the other thing I wanted to share is just the creativity. We have a program about what to do. It's called Park Like a Dad. And this is based off the idea that maybe our dads didn't park near other cars to make sure their car didn't get scratched from other doors, and would park away from the front spots that you would rush to in your department store or mall. And so we had a campaign, and we do have a campaign that says "Park like a dad" and park in the back corner so you can walk into the store. And it's about the basic things that you can do to make a huge. It's not only what you eat; it's kind of the psychology of just take care of yourself. It doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and pump iron for an hour or run, 10 miles every day. It's about the small things, and that has an enormous impact on you. So we're always kind of reminding people.
Yeah, that's excellent. I love that, park like a dad, and I think that getting, touching back on motivation is why do we do it? And oftentimes for men, for dads, right? It is for ourselves, for to be able to show up, but it's also for our kids, right? Who's walking with you across that parking lot, who is seeing you do that, and also getting that physical activity themselves. What are some of those other small things, or what are, when we're talking about small things, big impact? What's coming to mind for you?
Well, another big one, I talked about the physical. We have a program. It is about exercise. And I mentioned earlier about you don't need to, pump huge rock in the gym for a while. And we have a former hockey player who does a series of videos, and it's things that are all about your core. It's all about working your small muscles. So even when you go to the gym and you do heavy things or you run, whatever it is, swim, it doesn't need to be that bad. And he goes through and breaks down, the small muscles in your back around your shoulder blades. Like, how do you need to sit? See, right now, I'm not sitting properly. And how do you need to engage your body to make sure that it's the small part? Again, you don't need heavy muscles. It's the small things that need to be activated, and that helps your posture. And it's those small things, I'm using that as an example, that we really find resonate with people and really inspire them to get active. And so those types of things about supporting yourselves as a network of people, but also individually with partner organizations, and really building out that conversation. So it's not, again, this idea of one person, one company, one team of doctors. It's about the community. And that's what we spend a lot of time growing and explaining. And I do believe, that's going to make the difference.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And I think it's so interesting how much of this conversation is truly centered around motivation and the why, right?
Mhm.
Being that we have a list of those things to do, but we know that between that list is what actually motivates us, right? What moves us from spinning our tires to actually getting traction and moving toward better health.
Huge. And I think the other part I would say, on the critical side, on the medical side, is, I was in a motorcycle accident. On top of cancer, I was in a recent motorcycle accident. I lost a few weeks, a severe concussion, same broken areas from cancer. And I still struggle with the medical support, in the sense of, you go to your doctor, and if you had a broken arm, I say, if my arm had been cut off or had a broken femur, there tend to be lots of support and do this and do that. When you have a concussion, there's not that same support. And people, oh, you look fine. In fact, when I was in hospital, I remember sitting in hospital. Well, I don't remember. I was told that I was sitting there, and I was cold, but I didn't know enough to put, a blanket on. And because I looked fine, everything was internal, I didn't have that same support. My friend, who was on his motorcycle, had many more physical injuries, and he had the people that he needed, and rightly so. So I'm not necessarily being critical, but it is the reality of the journey that we are on. And there is that kind of, there's the man perspective. There's the perspective of, mental health versus physical health.
Mhm.
And so I really feel, back to where we started this conversation, that you do have a role, and you do have the authority and the power. And I would just really encourage people to, it doesn't mean you have to go and get a PhD on with this disease or that disease. It does mean you need to talk to doctors and your support system, but be your advocate,
Mhm.
um, because it does make an enormous difference on your health.
When it comes to healthcare, oftentimes we engage with healthcare, and the system reinforces this, unfortunately, where it is to be passive, right? To be passive recipients of healthcare. And
Yes.
really, where we want to get, right, is to have an athlete mindset, right? How do we become active, engaged members, right? If you're an athlete, talking to their coach is very different from a patient talking to their doctor. But the athlete mindset is about, what do I do? Well, how do I change my health? How do I change my edge? Um, I,
True.
so yeah, I think there's a lot there, as far as how we can, more actively engage, and, like you said, be advocates for ourselves.
Well, one of our clinicians that kind of advises us said, in her practice, she'll see a man come in, and she'll ask, how are you doing on eating? And he'll be like, oh, great. I don't eat anything. It's all low fat. And she looks at him. She's like, uh-huh, right. And so now, on the medical side, that's kind of the end of the conversation. And so now she's like, could you take a log of all your eating for the last month? And next time you come in, we're going to walk through. I'm eating really well because something's wrong here, because I can use my eyes and I can see that's going to be different to what you're telling me. But that's not necessarily part of her training, but that is part of her caring. And that's something I think is really important too, from that perspective of really challenging us. And that is what athletes do, right? They have certain parameters they have to hit, about protein and fat levels and all of those things. And I think for us, it's just about taking some of that back to Don't Change Much, one of our big campaigns, and it makes a big difference in your life. Drive it forward for yourself. That's the
Mhm.
easiest thing you can do, because the trade-off, if things do happen, and how that impacts your life, as I've lived through, it's enormous. And that's, anything you can avoid that is a plus.
I'll venture out, kind of a recommendation around that, or the number one healthiest drink for us is water, right? So plain water, right? That's number one, and that should be at least half of our intake, right? And green tea is arguably, and an unsweetened green tea is arguably number two, right? And it's a ways after water. Water is by far number one. But then the list goes down from there, right? But green tea is pretty good. Water's
Well,
number
thank
one.
you.
Water is
Thank you
good.
for saying that. And that's, you know what? That is the essence of the conversations. That right there is, I hear this, and to go out and find the information.
Yeah,
So I'll take that. Thank you, Doctor.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. So we've talked a bit about physical activity. We've talked um, about social support. We've talked about uh, doctors, and engaging with the medical system and moving toward an active role. For nutrition, are there other things that you recommend for that are some of those small steps within your initiative that are things you could share?
For sure. There's a long list of foods that help different parts of your body. We know that. It's going to sound like a broken record, but the safest path forward is balance.
Mm-hmm.
We create initiatives and recipes for different entities using a broad spectrum of foods, and that's really important. And you can do the research to know the value of an apple and the value of an orange. But back to what we were just talking about, the psychology of it all, we know that, and research shows that some of the best food plans allow you to have that piece of chocolate cake a little bit, that allows you kind of the broadness of what our palate likes when some of it is not good, but it's about balancing that out. And we have enormous response on, and I could say in some regards, if I say that in my mind, I'm thinking of my grandparents and maybe how they used to eat. But that's not necessarily the case. That just lands for me. But it's about simplistic foods. And the high processed foods. We did research recently to show the impact of just high processed foods and understanding what that is. And if I were to talk about cured meats, I think most people would be like, yeah, processed, highly processed. But it's also in how restaurants prepare foods and the type of oils that things are cooked in. And I'm like, there's nothing wrong with some great onion rings once in a while, and that's the key, once in a while. I think the problem is you get into this habit of routine, and your body naturally starts to crave these fats and these sugars. So if you have one burger, skip a day, I'll have another burger, and next thing you get a burger every day. That's awesome from the perspective of protein, maybe not so awesome on other parts of salt and all the additives that might be in there. Because you're not saying don't have a piece of cake, you're saying have a piece of cake once in a while and make sure it's a smaller piece than what you would normally have.
Yeah. Yeah, excellent. And yeah, it absolutely is about finding balance and finding what works for you, right? And food is highly personal and it's nostalgic, right? And so you had mentioned food that your parents ate or grandparents ate, right? And it's you need room for that, right?
Yeah.
There's a specific type of hostess cake that I used to have in my lunch when we'd go do a family project, and so every now and then, I know it's not great for me, but it's nostalgia, right? I'm going for nostalgia, and but I don't need nostalgia every single meal.
Absolutely. I have one remaining kidney, and so I had to be careful of protein. So at one point I lost it was 10 pounds in 7 days I lost because I had to restrict what I was supposed to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And because I couldn't eat, vegetables that were high in potassium because that was hard on my kidney. So I had a long list. And this was after my surgery. And guess where I've landed? It's okay to have, I can even have tomatoes now in the potassium, have a bit of everything. And I've gone from, don't eat these 10 things because you're back in hospital to have a bit of all of it, just a little bit. And guess what? My kidney health is back. And so that's really reinforced, it's really reinforcing my journey. And that is about the small things, balance and small everything.
Yeah. Thank you, Kenton. This discussion has been very helpful. I would like to talk about one last thing, and then also hand it over to you for any final thoughts or anything else you'd like to share. So when I was a health coach, I found, and it was the last goal that I would approach with people because I got the most resistance to it, and it was self-care, right? So people, they could stomach nutrition and exercise, they'd lean into that, but when I got to self-care, they got really dodgy. How have you approached that? How are you getting people to work on something like stress reduction? Things that may fly a little in the face of some views of masculinity.
The perception, I think, largely is that men aren't willing or able to talk to each other about kind of the personal things.
Mhm.
It's more about sports, politics, the weather, I don't know, whatever it is. And the research that was done recently suggests, guess what? Men are equally, as women, able to. Maybe we don't always understand how to approach it, but the idea is that we can have the conversations and we like to support each other. And that's a real starting point for these discussions, whether it's sports or maybe it is politics. But from that perspective that says, you are who you are and that's okay. And to help them transition as you're feeding information or they're feeding you information to kind of get back to the way we used to be. So we've always tried to, everything, our words we use and our approach is kind of reflecting that, to avoid that stigma that automatically gets popped up often in that I'm right, you're wrong. I'm a guy. I understand what I'm doing. I don't need your help. And it's really about the words and the intonation and the phrasing we use to take this message that we've talked about and make sure that it's relevant to people in their lives.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Kenton. And for our listeners, thank you so much for being with us today, and very much appreciate your engagement. And we hope the very best for you. We hope that this has been insightful, and you've gained some ideas and some motivation to go out and do what you need to for your health, so that you can continue to show up for yourself as well as those other people in your life. And Kenton, once again, thank you very much for being with us today and for all your work with the Canadian Men's Health Foundation.
Awesome. Thank you for your time and interest.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of Be Well, an It's Okay podcast. Check the It's Okay website for new episodes added quarterly. You can also visit the website for valuable information and resources for improving your well-being, including links to our employee assistant program in your area. Go to mentalhealth.cummins.com.